everything you're connected to can be a national threat. It transitioned from being this side project to being at the same level as the Army, the Air Force. It's on that list.
It could be iMessage, WhatsApp, Telegram, Instagram, Facebook, whatever platform it may be. Pedophiles and criminals and terrorists using those applications to organize crime, to smuggle drugs, to organize suicide attacks.
Hundreds of cyber attacks on Israel from China, Russia, Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah. We are really proud to be one of the 3 main countries that dominate the cyberspace.
Our solutions help to prevent hundreds of terror attacks, hundreds. You can sleep better at night knowing that technologies like our technology saving lives every day.
There's no doubt that the whole concept of war has changed. It's not anymore a man fighting another man. Today, cyber and intelligence became a main issue for the military. Israel invested tons and tons of time and knowledge in cyber. Israel became one of the leading countries in the world in cyber and intelligence. And as we all know, Israel is a small country. Today, we're only 9 million people. In 1973, the War of Yom Kippur, Israel got to the conclusion that they better change their whole tactic. Israel understood that investing in intelligence and knowledge is not just for pleasure, it's a survival tool for the state of Israel. In Proverbs chapter 24, it tells us that those who are crafty in knowledge will win the war.
A few months ago, a drone was being used in planning a terror attack in one of the biggest football stadiums in Europe. Load it with explosives and fly it into that stadium and just...
Huge amount of casualties.
Right.
So what your technology that we're going to see today is what prevented that?
Exactly.
On my left is the Kiryat, the military headquarters, and on my right, Azrieli Towers and the Sarona Market, the business heart of this land. Specifically, when you're talking about cyber, the military sector and the private sector not only cooperate, but they feed off of each other. To some, this connection might seem odd, but here it is a natural and ongoing relationship. One pool of people moves from one sector to the other, and the two build technologies that wouldn't be possible otherwise. I had the privilege of sitting down with David Primor, who spent 15 years in 8200, Israel's secretive leading intelligence unit and the center for the IDF cyber defense.
Hi.
Hey. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you as well.
He also spent 3 years as the executive director of technology for Israel's Cyber Directorate, before starting his own private cybersecurity company, Senomi. In short, he knows his stuff. So David, let's start in the beginning. You know, cyber is one of the top priorities from a defense perspective today.
Yeah, cyberspace was changed. Everyone is connected, and this connection gives the intelligence forces lots of possibilities to get the information in a way that was impossible to do in the past. When you try to protect the country, protect the government, protect your election process, protect the small and medium businesses, you have to protect against everybody, every technology. During my years in the Cybersecurity Authority, we handled hundreds of cyber attacks on Israel, from China, from Russia, from Iran, from Hamas, from Hezbollah. This capability is something that each state should have in order to be in control in the cyberspace. So I cannot talk about that, but Israeli should have this capability.
You can't say what you've done exactly. We've heard from others that we have those capabilities. And not only do we have them, we're rolling them out and using them on a regular basis.
Last year, there was an Iranian attack on the water infrastructure in Israel. As a state, when somebody tries to poison your water, what would you do?
Israel is heavily engaged in a cyber war. It's a matter of national defense. But this cyber war doesn't stop with the military. private companies that hold our data are just as much of a target. If you've ever used your credit card online, you are a potential victim in the new cyber war.
About 60% of small and medium businesses have been breached during one single year. And I thought...
Do they all know about it, or is this...
If you think about attacks that you are not aware of, it could be higher. Our data is not in our control. We all know about Google, Facebook, Microsoft, but there are so many third-party companies that control our data. We depend on their protection in order to be sure that our data is not exposed in the internet. Exposed in the dark web can be by anybody. So it's a big issue for individuals, for companies, for governments, for industry, how to protect themselves.
The interplay between the military and private sectors takes place inside a sort of feedback loop. The IDF is helping develop new founders and CEOs in the private sector. Then these private companies often supply contracts to the IDF. In essence, the two arms of Israel's cyber defense, military and private, couldn't exist without each other. You know, there's almost this claim against the Israeli startup industry that it's a clique of graduates of 8,200. In many cases it is, but it's a huge unit that has a large number of people graduating every year that have had their ability tested and honed in a unit that teaches cybersecurity and computer systems and gives a very deep knowledge of development. So it's almost setting them up naturally to go into the private sector.
Yeah, you understand that your contribution to the army, it's not only to be a fighter, it's not only to be a pilot, it's to be a cyber warrior, but also gives you lots of opportunities afterwards in the industry, in the high-tech, in the cyber companies.
Nowadays, our entire world is interconnected. From the cell phones in our pocket, to the smartwatches on our wrists, to the thousands of computers in the offices all around us, traffic lights, and even the drones flying through there, they're all talking to each other. And despite the benefit that this brings, it also makes them incredibly susceptible to cyber attacks. Over the past generation or so, an entire new industry has emerged, the cyber industry. Without that industry and the tools that it provides, this way of life, this interconnectivity wouldn't be possible. We're on our way to meet with Shalev Hulio, who's one of the founders of NSO, one of the most cutting-edge cyber companies in the world. These guys are in Herzliya, which is north of Tel Aviv, up on the coast, and they do things that very few other companies in the world are able to do. They work strictly with governments, helping protect the people of those countries against terrorism attacks. These people are sort of the stopgap between terrorism acts and malicious attacks and the people of different countries.
You know, we started in a chicken coop that we renovated, 3 guys. And today in these offices, we have almost 800 employees.
In 10 years?
In 10 years, yes.
It's quite a growth rate.
It is, very proud of it.
So you have a meeting in a European country, and you come back with this idea of, wait a minute, we might be onto something, and you come to your partners back in Israel, your board members, what do you tell them?
Tell them that we received a request for a law enforcement agency in Europe that basically said that our solution could help them to prevent crime and terror. And they ask if we will be willing to modify this solution for that purposes. And they explained to us that because of the application of the smartphone, that everything is encrypted, the instant messaging and the emails, and everything become encrypted, they can no longer collect intelligence, and they are blind. They can prevent crime, and they can't investigate or prevent terror. And then we're starting to get this request over and over again.
But what is the unique thing they saw in the product? What were you doing from a technical standpoint that no one else was doing?
We are a technological company, and in essence, that's providing software and solutions to governments, you know, to catch the bad guys. As simple as that.
NSO's flagship product, Pegasus, has been used by governments and law enforcement agencies across the globe to hack encrypted devices, gather intelligence, and stop everything from terrorist attacks to human trafficking. Since then, they've developed many other products, including search and rescue location software and their latest venture, Eclipse, that can stop drones being used to carry out terror attacks.
So, would you like to see the technology?
I'd love to.
Let's go.
So your system is what? Is it essentially it's like an electronic wall that says if you come into this parameter, this is what's going to happen to you?
I'll say it's an electronic dome. So
Okay.
anyone trying to penetrate that specific dome will result in us taking over that specific drone and landing it in a specific area.
In your control, of course.
In our control.
So this is the sort of the motherboard of this entire operation. This is where we are right now,
Right?
and the system's operational.
You see that the system is scanning, so it's
Yeah.
constantly monitoring for whatever drone is in the area. And then you can see the predefined no-fly zone, this red
Got it.
perimeter. You
Oh,
can
here
see
we go.
we have an indication.
Yep.
This indication says found.
This is a live map right now.
This is a live map.
It just crossed the red line.
It just crossed the red line. You can see that it stopped in mid-air.
Oh, there it says it.
Right.
Takeover successful.
Takeover successful.
Now it's locked on it, the operator has no control, and it's just going to come back on its own.
And as you can see, I'm not doing anything, right? The system is doing it automatically.
Here it comes.
Right, that's the drone, and you will see that the drone should land automatically just behind us,
Amazing.
right? And it just lands. So now imagine it's a critical facility you want to protect. Any drone flying in the area, you just define the
Just
no-fly
set the
zone.
parameter, and you don't have to worry
And you
about
can
it.
forget about it. right?
Amazing.
You don't need to operate, you don't need to click anything.
And just like that, it's done.
It's a scary world out there, filled with invisible digital attacks, militarized drones, and many secrets. But Israel is at the forefront of it all. In the process of defending ourselves, we've developed an industry that helps keep individuals, companies, and nations around the world one step ahead of their enemies.
Israel decided that cyber should be one of our main things. So Israel dominates the cyber industry. Israel dominates the cyber war.
We met with a law enforcement that actually told us from all the countries in the world, you understand more than anyone what is to fight terrorists, how to catch suicide bombers. You have a way to help the world be a better place. You know, when they basically put it like that, I had a decision in my mind that we're going to do it.
It's necessity, but it's also the nature of Israel is be able to face new challenges. We are really hard workers. So if we take innovation, hard work, and necessity together, so this is really, really special.
As benchmarks in the world of cybersecurity constantly shift, there are innovators doing their best to stay ahead of the curve. I met with Roy Eliyahu, who at 27 years old made it to the Forbes 30 Under 30 for developing a revolutionary way of keeping up with the ever-changing cyber war.
Roy, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
So for our viewers, if you read your bio, it looks like you're something of a young prodigy. And I think these kind of stories always tell themselves best when you start from the beginning.
Wow, that's a very long journey, to be honest. But it started very young, so I actually was very passionate about computers, about programming when I was very young. So when I was...
How young is very young?
When I was 9 years old, I started programming. When I was 11 years old, 2 years later, I started working as a freelancer. When I was very young...
What, coding for companies?
Yeah, coding for companies.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
It should come as no surprise that Roy ended up serving in an elite intelligence IDF unit. He broadened his knowledge and learned to believe in himself even more. Then, he set his sights on Silicon Valley.
When I started, I had no relationships, I had no networks. When we came up with the idea of SALT and the need for SALT, I bought tickets immediately to the Silicon Valley. No money, no fundraising. So living on a very low budget, you know, needed to sleep on animal mattresses in different people's homes. It was really, really difficult.
So you're couch surfing?
Yeah, eating every day at Taco Bell for $1. Like really a true struggle because you have no funding. It's a very, very expensive place.
What, you're showcasing your idea, basically?
right? And then you hear someone excited about your idea, think it's a good idea, and then you connect you to someone else, and then connect you to someone else, and you slowly start to expand your network and growing exponentially.
Hey, we love what you guys are doing, and we'd love to fund you and work together.
What? Can you repeat it?
Yeah, we love what you guys are doing, and we'd love to invest and work together.
The same VC that invested in Google, in Apple, in Oracle, in Workday, in LinkedIn, and the list goes on, decided to invest in us, and yes, decided to join our journey. So do you want to see the company?
Sure, let's go.
Let's go.
What does this company do? What is the need you're addressing with the company?
Salt Security, make it safe for organizations to innovate. 83% of the internet is API traffic. The API is the connector that connects your smartphone or your computer and transfer all your data, all your information to a given company. Our data is exposed through those APIs. So hackers realize the potential of APIs and they start to target APIs as the main entry point for a company. So we see all the communication coming from all the devices. We baseline what is legitimate behavior.
And then you flag an anomaly?
Yes. And when a single user out of billions of API calls do a small mistake, a small step that is not normal, we'll start to track this user. So when they get an alert, they will drill into this page that show them the user identifier. It will show them a summary of which APIs were attacked.
And this is what? This is all for one specific user?
To block a specific user was identified as an attacker. So just to give you an analogy, okay? If you go to an airport, you can have two approaches of security, right? The very basic one was you're going through a metal detector, and if you have metal on you, it will beep, right? So what we did is doing behavioral analysis to know someone looks suspicious. The way they walk, the way they talk, the way they move.
We're able to sort of like flag him in the crowd and say, that guy.
Yes. So we developed the technology. We patented the technology. We are the first company and the only company to use AI to prevent and detect API attacks.
Salt Security provides a unique and powerful tool to identify and eliminate cyber threats. And it remains a game changer in the constant battle to stay one step ahead of hackers.
When you innovate, you open more exposure to data. So if you cannot balance that with security, security will hold you down. It says we cannot do that. If you cannot secure APIs, you stop innovation. But with Salt, you can enable innovation. You can progress the wall. So that's the role of Salt in the wall.
Once again, Shalom from Jerusalem. With us today, we have General Yaakov Amidror. Shalom, General. What a great honor having you with us.
It's very nice to be here and to speak in Jerusalem about the issues of the Middle East and cyber. It's a great honor.
As a general in the Israeli army, there's no doubt that the war has changed. When we think in biblical times, Joshua entering into the land and fighting face-to-face against the enemy, today, not only that the war has changed, the enemy is not so defined. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, I think that there are few new phenomena in the battlefield. But at the end of the day, the difference is that because of the cyber, you can focus on a target. You don't have any military connection to the target, and still, from far away, you can reach the target and destroy it. Someone will enter to the electricity system of New York, and one day will shut it down from far away. No one will have a clue idea who did it. Israel was one of the first countries in the world which established a separate, independent agency to deal only with cyber defense. That is giving us today
a huge advantage.
Yes, a huge advantage. But at the same time, we have to remember that Israel, as a modern state, is very vulnerable to cyber attacks from the outside.
So cyber is two-way. It's one side you attack, and the other side you have to defend yourself 24/7.
And ironically, the more you are modern, the more you are vulnerable to the other side cyber attack.
There's no doubt, General, that our neighborhood has changed.
Yeah.
Once the enemy was clear, we had Egypt in the south, Syria in the north, but today, let's be honest, we have Iran, Turkey. I wouldn't say Turkey is an enemy, but we have to always follow up what they do, what they don't do. Can you elaborate on the region when it comes to intelligence and cyber and all that?
If you look at the Middle East of today, the strongest countries are not the Arab countries. It's Iran on one side and Turkey on the other side, and Israel in the middle. The Arab
Which
world,
brings us to a new era.
Yes, the Arab world is facing huge problems. The main change in the Middle East, after all, is the aggressiveness of Iran. Iran became, in the last 30 years, the most aggressive country in the Middle East. They built a corridor going from Iran through Iraq into Syria and Lebanon. They built Hezbollah in Lebanon, and now Hezbollah has 100,000 rockets and missiles. They are much involved in Yemen, helping the Houthis to fight the Saudis. In the past, they used Sudan as a bridge to move weapon systems from Iran into Egypt, to Gaza, and to Hezbollah. So you see Iran all over the Middle East. They are financing Hamas, they are helping Hamas to build its capabilities. Islamic Jihad is an organization which was built by the Iranians. And for Israel, as a little country, at the end of the day, we have an asymmetry which cannot be balanced. We are very little demographically, we are very little territorially. We will forever be in asymmetry. And one of the ways to bridge this asymmetry and to balance it is by having some advantage in areas in which territories and demography are not so important. Cyber is one of them, in which it doesn't matter how many people you have.
We hear, and I would say carefully, on foreign news that Israel attacks here and there, and sometimes the attacks are very far away from us.
Israel is very clear about its policy. We will not allow the Iranians to build an independent war machine in Syria. This corridor is the way of the Iranians to lead the weapon systems from Iran through Iraq into Syria and then into Lebanon. Wherever we can identify it and we can stop it, we are doing it. Today, cyber is a weapon system in two dimensions. One, it is source of intelligence. I think that it will not be exaggerations to evaluate that today the majority of the intelligence is either from cyber or from satellites. And the second issue, which cyber is very important in, it gives you the ability to act directly against your enemy inside his own system without being identified by your enemy.
That's huge.
Very few smart people are making the difference.
Cyber and the God of Israel.
Yes, this is always in the picture, you know.
General Yaakov Amidror, what a great pleasure to sit with you here on the set. Thank you very much.
It's a very good place.
It was a great honor. I hope you understand how complicated this whole issue is, and I want to encourage you to continue to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Thank you for joining us as we provide a spiritual insight of what God is doing in Israel and in the Middle East. If you want to learn more about what God is doing in Israel, make sure to visit us on our webpage and follow us on social media. Shalom, and God bless you from Jerusalem.